And in some context, hopefully a more aligned, holistic one, we made it. And in that sense, we made it here to deliver a message of energies to be implemented in a certain manner. We made it with a certain synergy of intelligences within this true, timeless moment to a time moment that just simply connects most holistically, the constructive aspects of whatever we're actually defining time is, and how that actually connects with the all timelessness. So and like I said, and I don't mean to be too brash. This is just like, this is my own therapy. This is my own this is my own act and my own art of emptying myself. And when one does that, it allows a different type of substance to come in depending on how you're emptying yourself and what you're emptying. And when that happens, a different type of miracle mechanism pursuit gets replenished in a different, like, synergistic alchemical way, respectively. And it doesn't always have to be like what they're telling you should be doing, or what it's glammed on the mainstream. It doesn't have to be a mainstream kind of act. It doesn't have to be like, anything per se, but at the same time it could be anything as well, because nothing is really justified per se. Everybody is just justifying themselves. And how that's happening is just the basic bare bone process of the process of maturation and growth, and growing, because like, aside from like the different like flavors and the themes of like, what is good or bad for someone, which is ultimately subject for the user, and what is like, correct and incorrect in like the different themes that are playing out within your relationship, pretty much to everything. That's like the underlying theme right here, is just that. And when you actually like receive and start to like process and like digest that particular concept, and it's not even just a concept, it's an act of life, it's a art of life, it's a process of life, it's a thing, which I guess is a concept. Things are concepts, right? But things don't have to be concepts. Things could just be things without any focalized, concentrated point of attention awareness, because that's what ultimately makes, a concept is, you like bringing light with your awareness and consciousness to something to actually light it up, and to like, focalize and concentrate something to be a concept to begin with, respectively, because there's concepts within concepts within concepts within concepts, depending on your definition of a concept. But right here, one of the main questions is, this is about, I don't have to be this is actually how I wanted to start the video. I don't have to be an expert in any field to be an inquisitive person and have an intuitive background knowledge as well, to actually, kind of formulate my own understanding of any type of subject or topic possible. And even though that, with what I just said, we all more or less like do that, but it's like, for it to be like, however we match the doingness with, the clear knowingness, then that produces itself, that depicts itself as far as, the being practicing that, and the articulation that's coming with that, and how that's, being woven into like the collective tapestry ad infinitum, respectively. Because I don't have to be a cybersecurity expert to ask, where is our data being stored? Why is our data being stored? How many different beings are storing it from across the cosmos? It's not necessarily about who, because the who is just like, they're just following their own chain of command with, what they are ultimately, respectively conditioned to do what they have to do for their survival. They're and I'm saying it at a neutral level. And last night I did an hour video, Negentropic Human Design, episode like 18. And it wasn't a fancy title. Usually I have fancy titles. I just did a simplified title called The Best Future Possible. And it was just me kind of like showing like the coordinates of, what the positionings of the planets were and what story was being told at that full moon from the new moon, and how that version of that time-space page got there from ultimately a little bit of everything else, from the collective knowingness and unknowingness of how we got here. Like, how did we get here? And that's another thing. We all started off as like all these like planetary programs, most precisely, is what we're moving through. Because at the early stage of this collective, plans and revelations, we all were like, tethered to this program of just like more or less leaning towards like some sort of extreme polarity of just, either like, either something along the lines of just like wanting to help people and not really knowing how that is a program, and how there's different operations of agendas that are ultimately supporting that ad infinitum, and then how that's evolved as of now. Because for us to want to be a healer, and to have clients, like, we just have to drop into the moment of like what the energetic exchange precisely is. And I say it like that because our intentions could change based on the emotional whirlwinds and the different people that are like just kind of fluctuating in and out of, I guess, anything, such as how things grow into something else, and how within the growth stage there could be like stages of stuntness, and within that stuntness I guess different like metaphorical meteorites and asteroids could be exchanged, right? Just very bluntly, neutrally, coming back to what we're ultimately working with. Because what we're ultimately working with, we have prominent energies from where we started, from where we've came, from where we started, from where we're still going, from where we still are, to ultimately where we're ultimately going to this supposed like multivarious trajectorializing infinity. Because like I said, it's like nothing is per se justified. If it's all a deep spiritual algorithm, and it's all about a deep like type of resonance matching with the different relationships and the tribulations that you're going with an archetype and their different modes and their different planetary modes, then one key thing is beyond the mind and the rhetoric, with the rhetoric and the mind in an exalted state. It's all about, leverage in the context of, how we're moving through our own inner battles, inner labyrinths, not even inner battle, inner labyrinth, inner puzzle, inner maze, for the neutral settings of how we're moving inward to overcome the tribulations based on all the anomalous leverages we have to garner and gather at this period of time, and how we could individually leverage that, and how collectively that is being leveraged for us, and more or less, not necessarily for us, depending on your unique individual resonance matching with how you're moving and equalizing the tribulation of any planetary archetypes and all their different modes. Because one context of fusion is just the fusion of adopting the planetary archetype mode of the instinctual DNA packet of how they're functioning within us, but they're not functioning in all modes within us, because we're not like when one overall, we're not overally in one fashion taken over by one thing. We're taken over by many things that have, and all those many different components, the 9 chakras, for example, or whatever chakra system you want to use, all the chakras have different modes within modes as well. And what I mean by that is, how like a planet could have different modes, and the planet could be in a chakra, but the chakra is not just the planet. The chakra is also an organ, energy center, and the chakra is also something that it's pretty much just an energy center that has so those are like pretty much the two main modes, and within those two main modes, those different modes have different like uses and context. So it's just for simplicity's sake, I'm just kind of like explaining how the chakras could lean like towards a deep energetic channel of different planetary influences, if that makes sense. But not even just that, like archetypes, archetypes of within archetypes. And it's not even about the planets like precisely like exactly matching the chakras. No, it could just be a channel behind it, a channel behind it, an orbit, like there could be all the solar systems in one like context of an esoteric psychological brain. They're always moving in some sort of way based on like how they all ultimately contributed to making the energetic chakra center chamber in that time for what it was in that time, because you have to ask how was everything ultimately made, And what I ultimately mean by that, like, the planets and the chakras, they could be synonymous, but they could also be differential. They could also be non-synonymous. And what I mean by that is we could have a planetary imprint that is just behind all of the chakras, just on a different context of a chakra, of all the planets, and what we find comfort in, or from what we came from simultaneously, is the planetary archetype we're leaning towards. And that planetary archetype we're leaning towards, we're more or less on one context taking on that energetic karma, because we're in their same patterning and we're in their same habitual mode of how they're moving, and how our relationship with that specific planetary archetype within their different modes and our different modes are ultimately having a pattern that's creating a certain direction that is ultimately positioning us where we're ultimately being positioned. But simultaneously, one of the bigger keys is like, no matter how privy we are of it or not, the human being is a conglomerate of all the planetary archetypes, which is the grand mystery, because all the planets on one low-key level, on a neutral level, whether this is harmonic with you or not, they all agreed for their version of their species creation to agree to enter into this human suit of similarity and similarity, and that similarity being is similar, like just like aside from the differences, looking at what literally is like similar as far as the human being, like we all have a stomach, we all have a heart, we all have a bee, a butt, just to put it nicely. And within that, on a different channel stream of low-key work, and I'm uploading all of this to like, a greater macro project respectively, because everything is subject for transcendence, hopefully in the best harmonic grace possible, period. But going back to like, we're ultimately, the miracle is in how you're specifically holistically leveraging everything. And also, it's not even about expecting or non-expecting, because even all the old rules are subject for transcendence. It's about doing what you feel is beneficial for your now moment. That's my truth for me. It's me processing this intelligence for however it got me to however it got me, however it's maintaining me and recreating me and transforming me, and wherever it got me to, like, whatever we're saying, however they're saying we're already here. But paradoxically and simultaneously, we're not, because this specific individual being is on a particular experiment to reconcile and recompensate and have redemption energetically for whatever wishes to be corrected from wherever you're actually having a problem anywhere in the cosmos respectively. And that could be pinpointed from the esoteric hyper mind, genius, intelligence from the collective universal mind, respectively. And it, you know, also going back to why do you feel there should be so many reasons why not to compare, you know? Because there's something that you don't necessarily know what someone else has experienced. And I'm just saying that for the fluidity of, like, for anybody giving me a detrimental judgment or a detrimental, you know, I guess what they're seeing as of now, but what they haven't seen from what has came from everything 16.4 billion years ago, and my memory, you know, alignment relationship with that to make me for what I am right now. You don't specifically know that advanced truth, or do you? And then streaming along is like, so a different context of the channel stream karma, respectively, is, you know, seeing how the unconscious, one definition of the unconscious is how we actually have all the archetypes of everything. Specifically, what's coming to mind is Lilith. So in one context of a karmic work, and this is one context of fusion too, it's like, we're not necessarily in, and that's a whole different video, the context of fusion. Like, I swear to God, that video like explains, I don't know when I'll probably do that, a journal entry first, just so I could get it real dialed in. But the context of fusion and how, like, how everything is, like, you know, how everything is created from a psychological, esoteric, intellectual, psychological level, how everything is created. I could explain that, and I've already explained that within, like, my whole, like, you know, process of, like, digesting, most respectively. But on a lighter note, you know, we already have this, like, energetic, you know, meta-physiological imprintings and archetypes and unpackaging of that journey. Specifically, for some reason, like, when this truth came to me, I was thinking of, like, you know, Lilith, and like I said in previous videos, the planets have different modes, you know, and if you actually I guess, you know, more or less have a different type of affiliation with me, you know, it's in my past content, you know, how I specifically explain that. I'm not going to explain that here, you know, because I'm just explaining how, like, you know, there's different contexts of karma, you know, and one context of karma is, you don't even have to call it karma, because that word is just, like, it has its own energetic baggage and its own collective interpretation and perception that's not ultimately, like, you know, accurate. And within that, it's just like it's a different cause and effect tribulation, which is a different context of karma. And we have a different cause and effect tribulation with our emotional to metaphysiological connection to our ultimate original spiritual connection, and that creates our mind association affiliation with the planetary archetype as of now, within that cause effect tribulation of the unpacking of the archetype that's already in us, hence the unconscious and the subconscious simultaneously. And in last night's video, an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 8 minutes, excuse me, I did NHD, and yet again, for like the fourth time, I specifically defined what the subconscious was. So I have a private Instagram. So even if you do somehow, like, unpack that and you hack that somehow, or like you see it however you see it, you heard it however you heard it, you know, the deeper, the more precise structural, you know, red tape, rainbow tape, new tape kind of affiliation of fairness is, you know, to, like, you know, have an ongoing, you know, fair mutual commitment dedication to seeing how you more or less get to choose who you're working with, and how you more or less not necessarily don't get to choose, because, you know, on a different spiritual algorithm, the spiritual algorithm is pretty much just like our like, you know, our affiliation with the planets, and how the planets are, like, pulling and pushing us and directing us and rearranging us to be where ultimately we're at, you know. That's just where they're at, and that's their electromagnetic system. And how we leverage that is our understanding and our completion of our tribulations with all of them simultaneously. And with all of them simultaneously, that is the direct essence magic to overcome any tribulation eventually, to actually eventually, you know, have a correct satisfaction of a equal exchange system for you to ultimately pass the next level. But we're trying to do the real specific dialed in precise logistical mission is to do that on a collective level. And to do that on a collective level is, you know, your tribulation through all the planets, it's paradoxically imbalanced. And what I mean by that is they're not all in agreement, you know. As the ages shift from 2,000 years to 2,000 years to 2,000 years, the systems change and the rules change. And within that changing systems, within the system changing rule set, within the background, you know, energetic controllers doing their arrangements based on however they're fucking finding equilibrium, and how everything in between is the byproduct, and how us on a material plane, we're the byproduct of the byproduct. And we are susceptible from detrimental archetypes and conditionings to just be in a mental funk, an emotional funk, and any type of other energetic funk, yet simultaneously with exalted, you know, mentalisms and emotionalisms, which create the constructive field for you to feel pleasure and joy and comfort and like new security to begin with. It streamlines like these energies most respectively to highlight what's the pinpointing cause of the detrimental energies. So and like I said, most neutrally, I'm here to follow up on, you know, the not only the claims, or no, I'm specifically here to follow up on these truths that are not necessarily like being represented as like a actual credibility, because, you know, we're balancing the rhetoric with our non-rhetoric, and how our non-rhetoric body, which is all of the bodies, is our non-rhetoric body is, you know, it's more or less, to some percentage degree, it's more or less living out the authenticity of that truth, and the embodiment being a byproduct on a deep spiritual evolutional level of how you're embodying that principle. Because on the deep original level, to embody a principle from a non-material realm respectively, that is a deep alchemical fusion state to create, you know, matter. You know, you have to ask how matter is created. And like, you know, I don't know, like literally, I don't know, like on a higher level, I just hope there's a higher algorithm and a higher innovation that could actually detect like everything I've already debunked and demystified, and how that, you know, how the contrast was, you know, it was from different collaborations ultimately, and from that different collaboration, the contrast created this epiphany. But like, to see how that's like, you know, to see the puzzle of you to your origins, isn't that all you should care about, you know? Isn't that all you should care about? But like, one of my points here is just like, you know, one context of karma is, you know, unpacking the archetype that's within us, installed within us, Lilith, for example. And I don't know, that's like one of the deepest ones, right? And you don't even have to call her Lilith, you know, because Lilith has different faces and moods, just like anybody else, you know. It's just, but she's just like, you know, she has a more original energetic form that has a deeper evolution, and that we have all these different perceptions and ideologies of her, that what we think of her and what we see of her within this fragmented moment, as opposed to her holistic moment. Then we have our own fragmented, skewed idea of what that Godhead oversoul ultimately is. You know, it's in essence, you know, all of this detrimental thinking respectively and neutrally, it's just a fragment. And that and honestly, that's like such a powerful word, because that word brings clarity to like literally everything. Like anything you're ever interfacing with, everything in your life, just ask yourself for the highest clarity as of this now, is it a fragment of something much, much greater? And how is that fragment being, you know, propped up with its own ratio of clarity and confusion? And how is that ultimately being, you know, most legitimately and realistically managed by the highest, biggest picture possible? So And sometimes, like when I'm doing these videos, I'll hear like a key phrase and I'll just be like, oh shit, that's the key phrase for the title of the video. But the context of fusion, that's a different video. And I said it before, the context of fusion. And I'm just doing this for like, I'm just doing this for like what I wish to like, how I want my field to have clarity, and how like all the different, you know, perceivers, Schrodinger's cats, you know, they're all like more or less reflecting back that clarity back to me. So it's a big paradox, you know. It's like, you know, just being a human is the biggest paradox, you know, a human from whatever you ultimately were. And why is it a paradox? Because, you know, what you're ultimately losing, eventually you will receive it back in different contexts and ways that we could yet to imagine, based on, you know, how we have the attempt and the intention to establish balance with all of the archetypes and the planets, and those being two standard modes of them. You know, the archetype being, you know, their overall, you know, wherever they're comfortable in the positioning that they're at, and then their planet, however they were ultimately formed, and how their material body got crafted. And then the anomaly of them is, I guess, the soul intelligence is, you know, reciprocating and delivering and distributing a certain type of energetic message by default from what it already is, respectively. And wow, yeah, this was kind of gisty too, you know. And like, here it goes. This was just kind of gisty, you know, because and I'm still gonna like keep on reformulating the craft and stuff, and I'll repeat messages just for like, you know, for the energy, for the sake of the energy's message and the message's energy of just like, you know, everything that's being said, there's a subject for an update, and it's ultimately not necessarily like it's not necessarily like, you know, mechanical, you know. And I mean mechanical in a more organic way, in such the fact that is like, to be silent all the time, or to be silent based on someone else's conditioning, preferencing, and an archetype from their, you know, separate level, as opposed to what's actually pointing to wholeness, that's not necessarily conducive for you living your purest embodiment of how you're all these archetypes, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, really, I guess I'm just like a stickler for like truth, you know. That's what I am. And, you know, how it's being interfaced is my, you know, challenge to bear. So this was like a slight astrology message, but it wasn't really astrological, because I wasn't really telling you, like last night's message on my private Instagram, like it was negentropic human design, moon magic, astrology. And it's, you know, the NHD is like, you know, has solid foundations of the astrology and the science and the programming psyche intel that is ultimately like, you know, in tandem and denoting and kind of behind human design in itself. And it's separate simultaneously from human design, and it's also inclusive to however, you know, the harmonic, constructive, collective field groups within the refined intelligence of the human design beings in the timeless realms to here is actually functioning, aside from however long you've been working at it with it respectively, because you are an infinite soul and you are an eternal soul, right? Yeah, and just like cybersecurity, and this is all like in tandem with like this is like pretty much, this is spiritual cybersecurity kind of like, but but like the mannerisms and the expressions are coming from a light note, mind you. And however that light note is ultimately being culminated is like, you know, the gifts and what we're having with what the planets are teaching us, but how we're not necessarily going to accept everything, you know, that is of a detriment. You know, what is like, you know, I guess on a scientific level, evil could be defined and described as like just the opposite of like, you know, everything that is like miraculously harmonic, I guess. And the in between, it's like on one energetic mode theme that is playing out in one channel just energetically, but it's so cool to like, it's not even spiritual bypassing. It's so cool to like honor your mind, honor your thinking, honor your exalted ego, of your exalted ego being what you came from all of the elements, and how you're identifying yourself to like go through this fucking life for it to ultimately teach you what? Modesty? That's what it feels like for me. Thank you very much. Have the best life ever.